Most children believed in Santa Claus. What really strengthened their belief was all of the evidence they had for it. The presents underneath the tree, the songs we sang about Santa, the movies and the books, right? Your parents telling you, your friends all saying what Santa Claus brought to them. We even visit Santa Claus at the mall and get our picture taken with him. There was overwhelming evidence, so of course children feel certain that Santa Claus exists. But then at some point, new evidence is introduced. Hey, I was just listening to one of your recent episodes. It was a good one. It was Ginny Hoyt, and it was a great conversation.
What was your take on it?
It was all very familiar content. It was a lot of what I do with my clients. But what I really appreciated was the back and forth between you two. You both were very articulate and how you brought forth the content and laid it out in a manner that lay people can understand. That's what it's all about. We can get lost in the scientific jargon, but I just loved how you guys recapped. You talk about it, and then you specifically recapped it. It was really good and very helpful. This is the kind of information that I think makes a difference for people.
Thank you so much for that feedback. Today, I want to introduce you to Fletcher Ellingson, a highly accomplished speaker, coach, and author. Fletcher is the mastermind behind the best-selling book, The Practice of Feeling Good, a guide that has helped numerous individuals break free from financial struggles, overwhelm, and persistent worry. Through his work, he empowers his clients to spend more time doing what they love, contribute meaningfully to their families, and making a positive impact in their communities. With extensive training in sales, entrepreneurship, and personal development, Fletcher is a true expert in communication, listening, problem solving, and facilitating breakthroughs. His expertise spans the crucial areas of health, wealth, and relationships, making him a sought-after coach for those looking to transform their lives. In addition to his coaching and speaking engagements, Fletcher hosts a weekly regional TV show called Live It Up, where he shares insights and inspiration with a broad audience. Not just a coach and author, Fletcher is also a professional magician who brings a touch of magic to everything he does, and his passion for transformation, ballroom dancing, and outdoor recreation reflects his diverse interests and dynamic personality. So please join me in welcoming Fletcher to the Transcendent Minds Podcast. Fletcher, welcome.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on the show, Peter. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. As a speaker and a coach and author of The Practice of Feeling Good, you've helped numerous clients break free from financial struggle and persistent worry. When you reflect on your journey and the challenges you've overcome to reach this point in your career, how has your personal experience with overcoming financial struggles and worry informed your approach to coaching others?
Many years ago, I was living paycheck to paycheck. It wasn't because I was lazy. In fact, I was an extremely hard worker. I've always been an entrepreneur, but I was lacking some key information and experience around creating a successful business, because I could crank up a business, but to scale it, to give it sustainability, I was missing some key pieces there, but also really just missing some key pieces in my mindset. I've created multiple businesses. Some have done wonderfully well, and some have crashed and burned in a ball of flames. It was those experiences, the ones that crashed and burned, that taught me the most and helped me to dig deep. How it all helps me is I'm able to relate to my clients. There's a great relatability because I've gone through it. It's one thing to teach somebody or advise somebody or coach somebody, and you can do it without having gone through it. But if you have gone through what your client has experienced, there is something very powerful about that. My failures and successes equip me to help my clients navigate their own challenges.
Failure is an opportunity to learn and align to that learning so that can become part of your basic constitution. You can then realign and reconnect with a new way forward, even if your intentions have been thwarted or it hasn't worked out for you. Failure by anagram is if a lure. If you're lured back into repeating the same setbacks, all the time, you clearly haven't realigned to new learning. It's got to become part of your whole being so you can amplify that into a new way, a new path. Mistakes cost you nothing. It's those mistakes that enables and empowers you to elevate. Because if you don't, you continue to fail and evaporate. But if you start to elevate and you fail and you elevate and you fail, you start to elevate, which is a great thing. In terms of the setbacks and challenges that you've had, in what ways do you continue to practice feeling good in your own life?
Yeah, that's a great question. First, let's define what feeling good means, right? Because a lot of people, what do you mean the practice of feeling good? I don't just mean happy. In fact, that's a term that I rarely use, happy. Nothing wrong with it. I like to feel happy, but it's not what I mean by feeling good. When I talk about the concept of feeling good, when I feel safe, when I feel satisfied, when I feel engaged or curious or open and willing or courageous, right? So these are ways of feeling good. When we go to a movie, for instance, we love to see the protagonist have that breakthrough towards the end of the movie where you want to stand up and cheer because he stepped into courage or she had an insight and took radical action. We want to stand up and cheer at the moment. That feels good. It's interesting because we actually say this and use this term a lot. Ooh, that tastes good. Ooh, that feels good. It's an umbrella term. And usually it's meaning something besides just happy. So what I do when I have a failure or a challenge, one of the questions I ask me like, gosh, where am I safe? Am I safe here? Because the story I have, I don't feel safe, but am I safe? The challenges and the failures are always prompting me now to ask forward moving questions. That wasn't always the case, Peter. It used to be there was a failure and I would beat myself up about it, or I would blame somebody. The blame game felt good in a way. It was relieving me of the responsibility. But now the failures, because of conditioning, right? It's the practice, heavy emphasis on the word practice. I've now conditioned the brain. So when there is a challenge, it triggers forward moving questions. I didn't come up with this concept. This has been taught to me by wonderful mentors that I've been blessed to work with over the years. When you can condition your brain to get to that point, that allows a person to navigate life with a greater sense of confidence. As a result, you're going to have access to producing new and outstanding outcomes.
We have the ability to instruct our faculty to produce new neural circuits.
Yes.
The key word you used is practice. You've
Yes.
got to be consistent with any kind of development work. There's a consistency that has to be at play in your everyday life, whether it's through an ecology of practices or meditation or prayer. It's something you do, and it has to be done not just as an academic exercise, but as a physiological exercise, because
Yes.
it's through the body, it's through doing something. And we'll talk about your rejection experiments. It's you going out there and doing it, getting feedback and being able to experience the rough and tumble of what personal development is about. I want to jump into your expertise in sales and entrepreneurship because that's evolved. How has that evolved as you've transitioned into a role focused on personal development?
I had a great opportunity to work with a startup a number of years ago. It was a technology company. The technology was actually pretty interesting because it's one that pretty much everyone uses today. Years ago, if you were going to purchase a house, you would go to a real estate office and sit down and say, hey, what's new on the market? They would bring out a physical hard copy book with photocopies of all the latest listings. You could look at those and say, hey, I want to look at that one or that one. Our company came up with this programming called IDX, which means Internet Data Exchange. It allowed people for the first time to search for homes online. At the time, this was like absolute disrupting technology. It was like revolutionary. It's like, what? You can search every home for sale online, right? And people were skeptical of it. And they're like, who's going to use that? And of course, now everybody uses it. But at the time, this afforded me the opportunity to travel extensively around the United States and speak over and over again, getting in front of thousands of people. That allowed me to hone my skill of communication. But something really interesting happened. It allowed me to tap into what I think is one of the human's superpowers, and that is pattern recognition. I believe pattern recognition is what sets us apart from all the other animals. Other animals do have pattern recognition, but the human species is able to do it and apply it at an incredible rate and in an incredible way. I began to notice that my clients were all the same. And we all think, oh, I'm unique and my problems are unique, but not so much. As I was diving deep into selling psychology and meeting with people, I found myself more and more in a coaching capacity because we had thousands of clients. They would contact me and talk about the issues they were having. And at first, they were masked as if there were issues all about the technology. As I listened more carefully, what I heard was, this is not the issue. This is the excuse. And what they were really dealing with was a mindset issue. I found myself in this coaching capacity over and over again, and it was almost like clockwork. You could apply this methodology and get that result. I've always wanted to be in a coaching or advising situation. As a result of that, I made the leap full time into it because I was already steeped in personal development. I saw the opportunity to merge these worlds of business and personal development, and it served me well in that capacity. After I left that, it has served me quite well.
Your weekly regional TV show, Live It Up, that
Yes.
allows you to reach a broader audience with your message of transformation. As you prepare for each episode, you draw on your diverse experiences in magic and ballroom dancing and outdoor recreation to illustrate key points about personal growth and development. How do you balance the entertainment aspect of your TV show with the deeper transformational message you want to convey?
Yeah, that's a great question, Peter. When we first started the show, my wife and I, she was doing it with me. She's a family physician. And so I would bring the psychology part of it. She would bring the medical part of it. And it was great. We could play off of each other. I don't know anything about medicine. She would bring the medical part, and I would just be so fascinated by the content she was bringing. I love the human body and learning about it. I would read an email that somebody had sent me and answer that on the call or on the TV show. But what we transitioned now into something I am having such fun with. I'm interviewing people in the community at large who are doing things that are giving back, because I'm a big fan of kindness. I think kindness heals. I think kindness unites. I define kindness as generosity, friendliness, and the willingness to render assistance without the need for acknowledgement or praise. If we can all embrace kindness, I believe it would heal our world. I don't mean you always have to agree with everybody, but if we can embrace kindness, generosity, friendliness, right, the willingness to assist, like just that alone is so powerful. We've shifted the focus of the show now to people who are doing that, who are being examples of contribution and kindness and giving back and making a difference. Most of the news or programming in the world, you don't watch that and leave feeling good. You actually leave feeling distraught, depressed, sad, alarmed. And that has, I believe, conditioned our world to think that's all that our world is. I want to bring forth another platform, much like you in this show. We're bringing different content to uplift people, to give people hope, to help people see a different alternative to what they're seeing in the normal media. I'm not throwing stones at other media. I think there's value there too, but I feel there's imbalance. And we need to focus on kindness, focus on contribution. And that's a long answer to your question, but that's how we've shifted into the show now. And I'm just having an absolute delight with it.
I watched that episode on kindness. That was wonderful. With you interviewing that
Oh,
gender,
right.
that was great. I totally agree with you. We need a different lens to look through. Life is multifaceted, it's kaleidoscopic. And there are different hues, different colors, and different ways of looking through the lens. You can take one thing and get 100 things from it. The media today that we see perpetuates fear, it perpetuates uncertainty. We're not getting the whole picture because the lens they're looking through is a specific journalistic lens. There's a lot more I could say, but that's not what we were focusing on, but we know it's there. As an expert in communication, listening, very important, active listening and problem solving. You frequently facilitate breakthroughs for clients in health, wealth, and relationships. You recognize each client's journey is unique and requires a tailored approach. How do you adapt your communication style and problem solving techniques to meet the diverse needs of your clients?
Yeah, excellent question. My methodology is always to help the client get curious about themselves. So I'm not going to sit on the other end of the call and be advising. We want to get the client curious. It's a journey of self-inquiry. The person who has to get curious is the person. They have to get curious about themselves. So all I do is help ask questions that they normally wouldn't ask themselves. As a result of that, we analyze their question and get curious about their answer. We continue to look at their answers and go deeper until they have the insight. That is so much more powerful when somebody sees it for themselves rather than being told. That's been the model that we used to grow up with. We were told and then you would apply. But it is powerful when a person has the insight for themselves and steps into a place of courage to do something about it. Curiosity is extremely powerful and highly underrated.
It's important to help that client find their own answers because they have it within them. They may need a little facilitation to be able to redirect their neural circuits and establish a new neuroplasticity, because that's in effect what you're doing.
Absolutely. When they have the realization or the insight of what they believe, I want them to get the impact of their thinking. So at the end of the day, what I help people do is change the way they think. What I mean by that is exactly what you said, laying down new neural pathways. So once they have the insight, now we can begin the exciting work. And the exciting work is beginning to reprogram some new thinking. What I mean by that is reprogramming. So they're going to be launching on a journey thinking new thoughts that they haven't ever thought before. I'll give you an example, and I'll use myself as an example. Many years ago, if you would have asked me if I valued financial stability, I would have said, of course I do. I absolutely do. But if you would have looked in my checking and savings account, you would have seen a big fat zero. And yet I still valued it. But I didn't believe that I was capable of having a big fat savings account. I didn't believe that I could work, I could create businesses, but I had a belief that said wealth, affluence, that's for other people, not me. I can still work hard, I can still create a business, I can still get by, but I can never be affluent. I can never have an abundance. Now, I didn't realize that belief was running me, but it was, and I was living into it over and over again, as evidenced by my checking and savings account. Upon realizing this, I had to create a new belief. And a belief is simply a feeling of certainty. The methodology that I help my clients with is once they see what a belief is, we ask the following 4 questions. Number 1, does the belief feel good? Does it feel good to believe that I can never create of wealth? Well, no, it doesn't feel good. We go to step 2 and say, then the belief must not be accurate. This was revolutionary for me because we feel like our beliefs are accurate. We think they're the truth. But when I ask myself, does it feel good? No. Then we take this audacious leap to say, then it must not be accurate. We go to step 3. If it's not accurate, then some form of the opposite of that belief is likely accurate. What's some form of the opposite that I can never be wealthy or attract a lot of money? Oh, the opposite is I can attract and amass some wealth. Now, that's a new belief. It doesn't feel certain yet, right? So it's not an actual belief yet, because a belief is a sense of certainty, and that didn't feel certain to me. We go to step 4, and step 4 is we begin to look for massive evidence to support this new belief that I want to have. That's how every single belief that we have is set up. A belief is simply a feeling of certainty, and the more evidence you can find in your life to support that belief, then that belief is really strong. I always use the example of Santa Claus. Most children believed in Santa Claus. What really strengthened their belief was all of the evidence they had for it. The presents underneath the tree, the songs that we sang about Santa, the movies and the books, right? Your parents telling you, your friends all saying what Santa Claus brought to them. We even visit Santa Claus at the mall and get our picture taken with him. There was overwhelming evidence So of course, children feel certain that Santa Claus exists, right? But then at some point, new evidence is introduced. Somebody at school says, you don't still believe in Santa Claus. Santa Claus is your mom and dad. And we go back home and Johnny said Santa Claus is not real. Oh, Johnny doesn't know what he's talking about. But then we maybe begin to recognize the handwriting on the presents, or we find the presents hidden in the closet or underneath the bed. We begin to amass enough evidence that something significant happens. A new belief, a new sense of certainty outweighs the previous belief so much that it makes it impossible to ever go back to the old belief. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about creating new neural pathways. We are amassing so much evidence that it makes the old program no longer relevant. When we can do that, it's a beautiful thing. The wonderful thing now, Peter, is that we know how to do it scientifically. We know this is how it occurs. Now it's just about being intentional about it, using this methodology and then practicing. And we talked about practice earlier. And I just heard this quote on another podcast recently where this comment that says practice makes perfect, but not really. But practice does make permanent. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah. And you bring up quite a lot of points, especially with belief. Belief can access a potential in you, and that will initiate certain actions which will produce results, which will either reinforce that belief system or reshape it.
Yes.
It depends if you keep going around that cycle, whether you cause an interruption so you can reshape your belief system. That does require not just willpower, because willpower wanes, motivation wanes, but it's the environment that you cultivate. Why is that belief so prevalent? Because the environment supports it. The Christmas tree, the songs, the Hallmark movies, and that whole environment supports that belief. Until someone comes along and goes, I want to question that.
I love that you brought environment up, because that is such a powerful part of reprogramming the brain. It's such an incredible, important part of the practice. Get around people who have the beliefs you want to have. If you want to believe that you can attract money into your life or create health and vitality. When I started doing triathlons for years, I had my friends asking me to come out and train with them. Peter, I had a strong sense of certainty that I could not do that. There was nothing wrong with my body, right? I was young, I had lots of energy, but to bike, swim, and run, I thought I was incapable of doing it. I said, you guys, you don't understand. Fortunately, they didn't give up on me. They pursued for several years, and finally, I said, okay, because secretly in my heart, I wanted to have that ability. I was envious of what they were doing. It was inspiring. The environment was key. I put myself in an environment where people had the results that I wanted to create. While I didn't have those results, I put myself in an environment where I could learn, and therefore I had access to it. They were supporting me, they were teaching me. And at the end of my first triathlon, I remember crossing the line and talking about creating certainty and changing beliefs. In that moment, I could not go back to the old belief that I'm not capable of doing this. I had enough evidence now that I knew I can finish a triathlon. I can be a triathlete. It was a brand new belief system, and I could never go back to the old belief.
Beautiful story. That underscores what we were just talking about, how you can reshape your belief system by facilitating an environment to reshape and redirect your neural circuitry. That way you can cognitively process it, because if you embody something, you've cognitively processed it through your physiology. You sent me some topics, and this got me very curious. One of the titles you sent me was Your Values Don't Mean Jack and What to Do About It.
This is one of my favorite conversations, because we talk a lot about values in life. Companies talk a lot about values. They spend a lot of money on these retreats. Hey, we're going to take a company-wide retreat. We're going to identify our core values and come back and kick butt. They go on retreats and identify their core values. And I'm not saying this is bad or wrong. What I'm saying is I think it's ineffective. The conversation needs to change. Is it okay if we invite your listeners to go through an exercise with us?
Go for it.
All right. Imagine, if you will, a big white piece of paper, blank, and we got it divided into two columns. And one of the columns is labeled my values. Some of your listeners might be thinking of honesty, loyalty, friendship, creativity, innovation, collaboration, communication, cooperation, courage, work ethic, integrity, authenticity. We have a long list of values. Now, these values look wonderful, but why I say values don't mean jack is because these values don't move the needle. If you had asked me many years ago, hey, Fletcher, do you value financial stability? Of course I do, Peter. Then again, you look at my savings account, big fat zero, zero investments, and a bunch of credit card debt. My wife and I used to host a weekend seminar called Diabetes Smackdown, the ultimate solution for people who were at risk for type 2 diabetes or who had full-on type 2 diabetes. There's one point in the seminar where we ask everybody, raise your hand if you value health and vitality. Every hand, of course, went up, right? Because everybody values health. But you can begin to see that just because I value health doesn't mean I have health. Just because I value financial stability doesn't mean I have a good financial standing. Just because I value honesty doesn't mean I don't lie. I used to lie all the time. I was the number one liar. I was the best liar. I was practiced at lying. But if you would have asked me at the time, hey, do you value honesty? Absolutely. You can begin to see that our values don't move the needle. They don't mean jack. Now, what I want you to do is I'll invite your listeners to mentally copy and paste the list of values that you and I just talked about. Copy and paste them over to the next blank column on that imaginary white sheet of paper. At the top of this column, you're going to label it the mafia's values. You're going to see that we share the exact same values as the mafia and every drug or organized crime syndicate on the planet. Now, some people are at this point like, Fletcher, what are you talking about? I object. I don't agree with that. Do they value loyalty? Absolutely.
Do they live it?
Yeah.
Like silence? They live it.
Exactly. Right? They value it and live it probably more than some of us, right? They take it very seriously. Freedom? Oh my gosh. They don't want to be told what to do. Family? Come on, they're all about family, right? Now, some people say, but what about honesty? They highly value, right? So you can begin to see that we actually share the same values as everybody on the planet, with very few exceptions. Some of my clients say, Fletcher, I really want to find that special person in my life partner, but I want them to share the same values as me. To that, I say, you didn't just narrow down the dating pool, you opened it to the entire planet. There's nothing wrong with values. And there's nothing wrong with talking about it. But what I will invite your listeners to consider is that values are simply and nothing more than indicators of preference. I prefer honesty. I prefer freedom. I prefer loyalty. But just because you prefer it doesn't mean you have it, you experience it. That brings us to the very important question. If values don't move the needle, then what does? That opens up the conversation about standards. Standards are what move the needle because a standard is what you're willing to settle for in that area of preference. You can prefer honesty. You can value honesty, but you may be settling for the occasional lie, the white lie, the omission of certain facts. So there's these standards that we all have around health and vitality, around sex, around money, around family. A few years ago, I wound up in the emergency room. I was having excruciating pain in my side, and I didn't know what was the matter. After I got admitted, they'd taken a urine sample and done all their testing. They came back and said, Fletcher, how much water do you drink a day? And I was like, how much water do I drink a day? I didn't even know. I couldn't even answer. I was like, I don't know. They said, because by the tests we've run, you're extremely dehydrated, and it doesn't look like you drink any water at all. I was stunned. I value my health, fitness, and vitality. I realized that I didn't have a standard around how much water. So I never wanted to go through that experience again. So now I have a clear standard. Here's the thing about standards. You want to be able to articulate them. Most of us don't know what they are. I couldn't articulate any of my standards. But now my standard is I drink a minimum of 60 ounces of water a day. Some people say, you need to be drinking more. This is my standard. It's the minimum. It's what I'm willing to settle for. Anything above that is a bonus. I'll give you one more example around standards. Back in the day, I may be behind in certain payments. I may have $0 in my savings account, very little in my checking, might be overdrawn. My standard was to not know my financial standing. I was willing to settle for not having a lot of money, to be behind in payments, to carry debt. to have car payments. Then I met one of my friends one day and he had just purchased a truck. And I said, wow, this is a beautiful truck. What's your monthly payment? He said, oh, we don't have one. I took a beat because I was like, I don't get it. What do you mean you don't have a monthly payment? He said, well, we paid cash. That concept was novel to me. I was like, what? You're talking about many thousands of dollars. Yeah, we just paid cash. I was like, how did you do that? I thought that everybody had a car payment and that's just the way life was. I really did. Then you trade that car in at some point and you get another car with a higher car payment. We have a standard in our household around how we save money. Every month, we put X amount into this virtual envelope. In 4 or 5 years, we have enough to purchase a vehicle, whether it's used or new, outright. So I began to do that, right? Not only did I begin to do that, I made a powerful declaration, a powerful decision. My decision around my financial standing was, I will never be behind again. I will always be ahead. If you went to the town hall here and looked up my account for my water, my sewer, garbage, you'll see that I'm paid ahead months in advance. Some people say, that's ridiculous. Why would you do that? Because it's my standard. My standard is to always be ahead financially. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that, but what I'm encouraging you to do is get clear about what your standards are. Are they serving you? Are they holding you back? There's no judgment. Just get curious. Can you articulate what your standard is for your health, for your wealth, for your relationships, for your sleep? Do you make the bed in the morning or do you leave it unmade? No judgment either way, but just become aware that your standards are everywhere. And when we begin to do that, we're all about progress in life because progress feels good, right? And when we understand our standards begin to give us access to different levels of progress.
Standards, principles, and your foundations and how you address them are extremely important to me. If I'm on a project or I intend to complete something and I'm tired, my standards start to drop. But that's when I need to elevate them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's easy, especially for men, because men will always try and wing things. It's a bit like, I can't be bothered. My point here is I have to address my standard, especially when I'm feeling low or I'm quite tired. That's when my standards come into play because I have a value for it. For me, values are essential aspects of the psyche that guide our actions and guide our decisions. If we don't consciously integrate these values into our lives, they become mere abstractions.
Absolutely. Exactly.
This is the process of integrating different parts of the self, including one's values, into a coherent whole. If you don't do that, they're not meaningful.
Exactly. The standards, they breathe the meaning in and life into the values.
Exactly. That process involves aligning actions with those values to achieve psychological wholeness. This touches on things like shadow work or integrating the unconscious aspects of the self, because that helps in understanding and living one's true values.
I would just add one more thing that's really important in this conversation about standards is that, so if you identify your standards and you realize, gosh, you know what, these standards aren't serving my life, the fastest way to adjust your standards is to get around people, again, changing your environment, who have the standards you want to have. So again, it comes back to that conversation about what's your environment, right?
Are there any particular strategies that you found most effective in helping people bridge the gap between their professed values and their daily choices?
Yeah. Once you identify your standard, ask the question, does this standard support my life in the way I want it to? Does it feel good? Does it move me forward? If you see that it's not moving you forward, then the same thing we want to do is that we did with our beliefs. We want to say, what is the standard that I want to have? I don't have it yet, but what standard I like to have? If I could wave a magic wand, you name that standard, you write it out so that you can articulate it. Okay. I go back to this over and over again because it's part of the integration of creating new neural pathways, of having such clarity that you can speak it. You speak that over and over again, and then you begin to look and gather evidence to support it. So the methodology is define the standard you want to have, begin to take small baby steps immediately that begin to support it. As soon as you take a baby step, you verbally affirm it. Ooh, I love that I just drank a 12-ounce glass of water. I love that I have this standard of 60 ounces of water. I love that standard is creating health and vitality in my body. We are constantly affirming and reaffirming. Why are we doing that? Because we're conditioning. You get the outcomes that you're conditioned for. So one of the frustrating things in life is people want these outcomes, but they are outside of their current level of programming. They don't have access to them. They can see the outcome, they see other people, but they literally don't have access to that because they're conditioned for a different outcome. That's why I'm so big on journaling our beliefs, journaling our standards, talking about them, supporting them with evidence, affirming them, sharing them. This is part of the conditioning.
I love the neuroscience that's supporting all those things. Taking baby steps are important, even though not every step is equivalent. But by setting your feet upon that path of taking baby steps leads you into a bigger world.
Absolutely. And that's exciting because what we're talking about is progress. At the end of the day, we want progress in our health, wealth, relationships. We are always looking for progress. Progress simply feels good. When we say it feels good, we literally mean chemically in the body, in the nervous system, you're getting those dopamine hit, that serotonin or oxytocin. It feels literally good. That's what we're always searching for.
Another title that I got curious about is your year of rejection experiments. You decided to embark on a year-long journey of intentionally seeking out rejection in various aspects of your life. This unconventional approach to personal growth yielded surprising insights and transformative experiences. What was the most unexpected lesson you learned from your year of rejection experiments?
Yeah, a little background for your listeners. I intentionally put myself into situations where I would make audacious and bold requests with the intention of being told no. Okay. So my goal was to get rejected so I could overcome my fear of rejection and become a master asker. Because the game that I'm playing in life, I realized I need to be a master asker. I need to be able to make requests of people without the fear of being told no. These asks I was making were ridiculous and audacious and frequently would catch people off guard. The intent was to get rejected. But what I learned was more often than not, people, instead of rejecting me, would say yes. These were some ridiculous things I was asking people to do. They would more often than not say yes. And I began to realize that when I did get rejected, they weren't rejecting me, they were rejecting my offer. So I was able ultimately to separate myself from the offer and their rejection. It's no big deal. If you ask your child to do something, you've been living with this child for 18, 20 years. If you ask them to do something and they say no, you're not crushed by it. But to ask a complete stranger or your boss or a colleague, it's very different. But mechanically, it's no different. You simply make a request. There's an answer, yes or no, or counter offer. But we somehow attach a story to it that feels so disempowering that we stop making requests. It was a powerful lesson. If you're in sales, I highly recommend this because you want to be able to ask for what you want.
Tell us about the ping pong story.
That was when I was visiting my in-laws in Southern California. I was on a walk that morning. It was beautiful. I was on vacation, but I still wanted to do these rejection experiments. I was walking past this house. It was up on a slope, so I could see into the garage door was open, and I had a ping pong table in there. Immediately, my brain said, no, don't do this one, Fletcher. Don't do it. Because I'd already got the vision of what I had to do, but my fear was kicking in. And boy, I tell you, one of the lessons I learned through this whole thing was how loud my inner voice is, how loud the fear is. And it just is very bold, articulate, and intense. The voice was saying, don't do this one, Fletcher. Choose another one. But I knew that was my fear of rejection. I had to do it. I decided to go up to their house and ask somebody to play a game of ping pong with me in their garage. This one was particularly nerve-wracking because I had to cross over somebody's physical property. I had to cross that line from public street across their physical property line, went up and knocked on their door, and I heard the dog barking in the background there inside the house and people talking. A few seconds later, a lady comes and opens the door. She's, hey, can I help you? I said, yeah. Hey, my name's Fletcher. I am visiting from Washington State, and I was just walking through the neighborhood. I noticed you have a ping pong table and was wondering if anybody wants to play ping pong this morning. Her response was exactly what almost everybody said when I asked these rejection experiments. She just said, what? Because it's a pattern interrupt. You're not anticipating this kind of request from a stranger. It's usually, I need to get directions or something like that. I just repeated everything from Washington, saw this ping pong table, wanted to know if you were willing to play ping pong. She says, do we know you? I said, no, I'm from Washington State. She says, you just want to play ping pong? I said, yeah, if anyone's willing to. She said, just a second. She shuts the door. There's hushed voices I can hear having a conversation. A few seconds later, the husband comes and opens the door. He says the same thing. Can I help you? I go through my whole spiel again. From Washington, on a walk, saw the ping pong table. Anybody want to play ping pong? He goes through the same questioning. Do we know you? Nope, I'm from Washington State, just visiting my in-laws. And you just want to play ping pong? Yeah, if you're willing. I love ping pong. Happy to play ping pong. He shuts the door. More hushed voices. And a few seconds later, their teenage son opens the door and he says, hey, my dad says you're looking for someone to play ping pong with. And I said, you bet. Do you want to play? So we went and played 2 games, and then I was off on my way. That is a prime example of making a ridiculous question. That scared me. I was very nervous. And I was expecting for sure, Peter, I would have put money on this, that it was going to be easy no. They were going to reject me. Instead, they indulged the request, and I had fun playing ping pong with this kid.
That was one case. I know there were many other stories, but how did that rejection affect your confidence and perception of self-worth?
What it did for me was I realized, hold on a second, there's something happening here. I'm getting the things that I'm asking for. What would happen if I begin to ask life for the things that I wanted? What would happen if I begin to ask people for what I actually wanted? I became more empowered along the way. One of the rules was the asks always had to make me nervous. I never got over that. I was still feeling really nervous, starting to sweat. That never went away. But what I did notice was that there was still a level of confidence. There was still an anticipation that this will work out. The things I was asking were just absolutely ridiculous. I went into a mattress store one time and asked the clerk, hey, can I help you find something? It's like, actually, I was wondering if I could take a nap on your mattress. Would it be all right if I just brought my pillow and my AirPods and took a nap here? I'd like to test drive this mattress. She said, in the store? And I said, yeah, just right here. Is that okay? She said, we never had anyone ask that. She said, there's other customers here walking around. I had no problem. I'll just have my AirPods in. I'll just take a nap right here. She said, let me check with my manager. So the manager comes over and said, I understand you want to take a nap here in the store? And I said, yeah, if it's all right. And so he said, it's unusual, but could you come back after the lunch rush? Just come back when there's less traffic was his concern. What would happen if you began to ask for what you wanted?
Can embracing rejection be beneficial in all areas of life, or are there exceptions?
I'm pausing before I answer that. That's a good question. I think embracing rejection or the potential for rejection moves us forward. I don't know how it will move you forward in every situation, but I trust that life's always working out for our greatest evolution. Not the way I want it to work out, but for our greatest evolution. If I embrace rejection in the context that life's always working out for my greatest evolution, I'm willing to play that game.
What advice would you give to someone who fears rejection but wants to try this experiment?
I would encourage you to do is start small. Find something that doesn't feel tremendously scary, right? And make that request. You could even role play with somebody you trust, knowing that you're going to do a rejection experiment. Make the request so you're conditioning yourself to say the words ahead of time and have that person who's role playing with you reject you in various ways. Maybe they reject you harshly, maybe they ignore you, maybe they curse at you, so that you're conditioned ahead of time. I never did that, but as you asked that, this kind of came to mind. We've been talking a lot about conditioning yourself, but I highly recommend it. But yeah, ease yourself into it. Take baby steps, because I think you're going to be surprised.
Facing rejection head on is a powerful method to build resilience and reduce the fear of failure, because it encourages personal growth. I am speaking not from having done this experiment, but I was in sales at one point in my life, and I recognized with my sales team at the time that what we were developing was a thicker skin because we heard no so many times, which in our vocabulary meant next one.
Yeah, exactly.
You develop resilience and it encourages personal growth, it enhances emotional strength and broadens your comfort zone. The other aspect for it is it desensitizes. If you have regular exposure to rejection, as you have in your year-long experiment, it desensitizes the fear response.
Yeah, exactly.
When you learn from rejection, that can lead to personal and professional growth because it fosters a mindset of persistence and determination. Can it be detrimental? Because learning to cope with rejection is valuable, but deliberately seeking out rejection for some may lead to unnecessary stress or demotivation or damage to self-worth if not handled properly. Like you
Yes.
were saying, take baby steps, because chronic rejection may lead to emotional burnout and increased anxiety. It reinforce negative self-perceptions and discourage risk-taking. But with proper support and reflection, this person gained valuable insights from rejection, and that experience built resilience and taught really important life lessons. So I think intentional exposure to rejection, when balanced with self-reflection and support, can be
Yes.
a valuable tool for building resilience and reducing the fear of failure. But I think it should be approached mindfully to avoid potential negative effects.
Yes. You are so good at summarizing. It's so good. You have a real gift for that. I've noticed that on your other episodes too.
Thank you. Talk to me about the gift of fear, because we all perceive fear negatively, but I see it as a powerful ally. On the one hand, it serves as an instinctual warning system, alerts us to potential danger and prompts us to take necessary precautions. But if we embrace fear as a guide, it can enhance our ability to navigate risky situations and make much more informed and intelligent decisions. In what ways can fear be considered a gift? And can you
Mm.
recall any instances where fear has positively influenced your decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first off, I want to emphasize what you said. There's nothing wrong with fear. It's not bad. We want to get the message of fear. And the message is always, hey, pay attention. You
Mm.
might be in danger here. It's like a red flag. Pay attention, be alert. But it's hypervigilant. It sees so much that is fearful. It sees so much as a threat. But what we want to do is understand what is at the core of fear. When we understand what is at the very center of fear, we can begin to navigate it and manage it in a different and more empowered way. What is at the core of fear is a story. It's a story that might hurt me. They might dupe me. I might fail. There is always a story at the core of fear. If you can hone in on that, you will have access to the gift of fear. I'll get to that in a minute, but fear always travels with this gift. This gift is actually fear's kryptonite. Kryptonite weakens Superman. This gift weakens or diminishes the fear because fear can be crippling. It can absolutely hold you back. The gift of fear is the opportunity to be courageous. The only time we can be courageous or brave in life is if fear is present. You cannot decide to be courageous without fear being present. That's called confidence, and that's very different than courage. Courageous people are dealing with a specific fear in that very moment. So the gift of fear is that it always travels with the opportunity to be courageous. And now it gets really interesting. Because what is courage? At the very center of courage is simply another story. So, for instance, if a fire engine races up to an apartment complex that is all ablaze, right? It's on fire and there's smoke billowing out of the roof and the windows and people are yelling. Those firefighters, by the way, they're going to have a high level of fear. They're not chilling back and, oh, yeah, no big deal. No, there is a lot of fear present. If they paid attention to that fear story, which is don't go in that building, you're not going to save those people. You're probably going to lose your life. You're not going to make it back to your family tonight. If they paid attention to that story, they wouldn't be able to take action. But fear always travels with the gift to be courageous. So there's another story that they're paying attention to. That story is we've trained for this. I've got a team and we've done this before. These people are depending on us. We can get them out. We know how to navigate this. So we want to practice. Again, there's that word practice. We want to practice at focusing on the story that empowers us, the feel-good story that moves us forward, that pulls us into action. And so this process I go through on a daily basis. Fear has a mind of its own. It just wants to protect me by bringing potential threats to my brain. I see this every day. So I have an opportunity every day to create a different story. No, I've got this. I've done this before. It'll be okay. Even if it doesn't work out the way I want it, I'll get through it. I love the gift of fear. I love feeling courageous. And again, going back to the movies, don't we all love that? When the person, even though they're feeling fearful, they take that courageous action.
A person goes from perception to story to conclusion in a nanosecond. So that story kicks in so quickly before they know it. They're manifesting the outplay of that story. A question that comes to mind in terms of interfacing with your clients is, how do you help your clients distinguish between fear that's holding them back and fear that's guiding them towards growth?
It comes back to that way of being called curious. So we want to get curious about the fear. What's the story? Is that story accurate? Or is it like what Wayne Dyer calls it, false evidence appearing real?
Or face everything and rise.
Yeah, exactly. We always want to get curious and take a beat because, like you said, those stories, the story and the conclusion, it happens without your permission, consent, or approval. This is something you and Ginny Hoyt were talking about, being the witness of your thoughts. Because these thoughts are happening without our permission, consent, or approval. We frequently make the mistakes that I'm thinking it. I'm not thinking it. The machinery is producing that thought without my approval. It did not consult me. It just produces it. It's an opportunity to condition ourselves. Let's get curious. Does this thought that just came into my mind, is it accurate? Does it serve me? If it does, okay, maybe I shouldn't take that action. Or if it's false evidence appearing real, then what's another alternative story that I can produce deliberately? Now I am using the brain instead of the brain using me. I'm choosing to create a different narrative. And I love it when, in my opinion, Peter, it's very rare that we're actually intentionally creating thoughts. It's mostly just on autopilot, not good, bad, right, or wrong. That's just how we go through life. But when we're faced with these moments, we feel alive, we feel engaged. Now I can say, what do I want to think about this situation? What do I want to do? What's the outcome that I want? Then I have an opportunity to align my thinking with my desired outcome. That is really getting to the core of this entire thing called the practice of feeling good. At the core of the practice of feeling good is simply the practice of bringing an empowering story to any situation.
Fear is a valuable guide that can lead to greater self-understanding and growth. One of the signals of fear is the unconscious mind trying to communicate important information. If you explore and integrate these fears, you can achieve a more balanced whole self. Fear is really the guide to understanding your deeper unconscious issues. When we integrate fear, it involves acknowledging and exploring it rather than just avoiding it.
Yes.
And this is what Jung calls the shadow. When we include fears, when we're confronted with those fears, that can lead us to personal growth. That's what we're built for. We're not built to be slumped in comfort and fed like dogs.
Exactly.
We're built for this kind of thing.
Yes.
But it's understanding, how do we start to have that conversation? That's the conversation we need to have. That's where we need to diminish resistance and create momentum in our lives.
Yes. Yes. And I love what you just said. Reduce resistance, create momentum. This is actually something that I love talking about with my clients. We talk a lot about how to create momentum. And you'll notice that momentum is only experienced when your thinking is in alignment with your desired outcome. Now, when people are experiencing momentum, and it feels really good momentum because it's progress and progress feels good, when we're experiencing momentum, we feel like we're in the zone, right? We're in flow state. And it just seems so much easier. That's because our thinking is absolutely aligned with our desired outcome. And then sometimes what will happen is there's a switch that gets triggered, and all of a sudden momentum comes to a crashing halt. People are like, I had all this momentum. Where'd it go? What happened was that they introduced probably old programmatic thinking that was not in alignment with their desired outcome. So it puts on the brakes. If you want to be somebody who is able to create momentum on demand, consider that we must align our thinking. So intentionally thinking thoughts that are in alignment with the desired outcome. Resistance at the core is simply a story that's not in alignment with your desired outcome.
We're back to the unconscious mind resisting change, or really it's the integration of the new aspects of the self. Overcoming resistance involves engaging with the unconscious, understanding its sources, and gradually integrating these aspects into the conscious mind. That's the process that can create momentum and lead to personal transformation. Because resistance often comes from unconscious fears or unresolved conflicts. But when we engage with the unconscious through techniques like meditation, dream analysis, or active imagination, that can diminish resistance. That involves the integration of these unconscious aspects into the conscious self. You're superimposing what is currently in your conscious mind by having that conversation with the unconscious, integrating those things, letting go of what you don't need, marshaling resources that you need. These things are saying to you, hey, all you really have here is a lack of resources. What resources do you need?
Yeah.
Oh, I need these resources. Okay, how do I go about getting these resources? What steps can I take to integrate these aspects into my conscious self? How can I start to understand the sources of resistance where I can create momentum for personal transformation?
Yes.
That's part of the process. This is really about getting a true education, which is what I see you're doing with your show and the work you do. I actually loved watching your TV show online. That was great. There's a lot more we could go through. I'm respectful of your time. Where can people find you? And do you have any parting words for the audience?
Yes. You can find me at my first and last name.com. So FletcherEllingson.com or thepracticeoffeelinggood.com. Either will take you to the same place. You can go to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book there. I would encourage people to spend some time deliberately defining who they are, not the roles you play. Those are easy. I'm a magician, I'm an author, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a friend. Those are roles I play, and I'm not diminishing them. They're wonderful. But who are you? When we are informed about who we are, when we declare who we are, this begins to create momentum because your thinking is in alignment with your desired outcomes. There's a breakout room or a lunch, and you're sitting at these big round tables, and you're with strangers, and somebody next to you says, "So Fletcher, who are you?" Oh boy, I used to dread that because all I knew how to say was the roles I play in this life. But who am I? When I actually took time to define who I was, it was a game changer for me. So who I defined myself to be is I am a clearing for people to feel safe, heard, and empowered, period. That's who Fletcher Ellingson is. He wears a lot of different hats, but who he is a clearing for people to feel safe, heard, and empowered. That informs so much of what I'm going to be doing during my life. I have clarity about who I am. A lot of people love to know who they are, right? They're like, oh, I got to go to India and meditate under a tree for a year or find a guru. Nothing wrong with it at all. But what I want to suggest to you is you can simply decide, you can declare who you are and begin to live into it, because I think language matters. I think it is how we're constantly creating our experiences through language. Yes, take some time, decide who you are. Some people get tripped up by that. I don't know who I am, or I would feel like an imposter. It's conditioning. Define who you want to be. Condition yourself, look for the evidence, live into it. Because when you have clarity about who you are, you have massive access to creating momentum.
Beautiful. So well said. You create a safe space so it can be a brave space for people. When you create that safe space, it becomes that brave space for them to be fully self-expressed so they can have an active genesis in taking radical responsibility. We understand as human beings, we are responsible for our actions, our reactions, the outcomes of our lives. And it emphasizes taking complete ownership without blaming external circumstances or people, because it's easy to go into blame and avoidance as distinct from truth and responsibility. hey, guess what? They're on the same line. Which camp do you want to be in? The
Yes.
mindset is to empower and enable what can shape your agency to make meaningful changes in your life by focusing on what you can control. I want to thank you so much for your valuable insights, your knowledge, your incredible energy, which is fantastic. I can see why you do what you do, Fletcher. How have you experienced today?
Oh, this has been so good. I was looking forward to this interview. I appreciate how articulate you are and your insights and your ability to explain and recap. I want to acknowledge you for being a source of kindness and contribution in our world. Your show is great. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I receive that. I appreciate and I acknowledge you too.